High above the Liri Valley, the monastery of Monte Cassino stood like a silent sentinel, 1,700 years of history carved into the rocky heights of central Italy. In early 1944, the Allied push toward Rome had ground to a halt beneath its shadow. From a distance, the abbey appeared peaceful, untouched by war, yet every soldier who looked up at it felt the same unease, the sense of being watched. For weeks, Allied patrols reported precise German artillery strikes, shells falling almost as soon as they moved. It seemed impossible unless the enemy had eyes high above, inside the monastery itself. "They're up there," one American officer muttered, binoculars in hand. "They can see every move we make." But there was no proof, only suspicion. The Vatican had declared the abbey neutral ground, and the Germans swore it was unoccupied. Still, many in the Allied command doubted their word. The battle for Monte Cassino was part of the wider Italian campaign, launched after the Allied landings at Salerno in September 1943. The goal was clear: break through the Gustav Line, a formidable German defensive barrier running across the Italian peninsula, and liberate Rome. But Monte Cassino, sitting atop a steep, rocky ridge, anchored that line. The Germans, particularly the elite paratroopers of the 1st Volkssturmger Division, used the terrain to perfection. Every ridge, every ravine, was an ambush waiting to happen. The U.S. 34th Infantry Division, the Red Bulls, was among the first to test the mountain's defenses. Between January and February 1944, they launched a series of brutal assaults up the slopes. Soldiers climbed through freezing rain, mud, and shattered olive groves, dragging machine guns and mortars up terrain so steep they had to use ropes. "It wasn't a hill," one veteran later said. "It was a wall." Every inch cost lives. German machine guns hidden among the rocks fired from invisible angles, and mortars landed with uncanny precision. The Americans soon began to whisper about ghost gunners, enemy observers who vanished before anyone could locate them. Reconnaissance planes tried to spot movement around the monastery, but the thick walls and ancient stone courtyards gave nothing away. Inside the Allied command tents, arguments erupted. Lieutenant General Mark W. Clark, commanding the U.S. Fifth Army, faced a terrible dilemma. If the monastery truly was being used as a fortress, it had to be destroyed. But if it wasn't, bombing it would annihilate one of Europe's most sacred sites and potentially turn world opinion against the Allies. Reports were conflicting. Some British and Indian units claimed to have seen German soldiers near the abbey walls. Others insisted the monks remained, quietly continuing their prayers even as shells fell nearby. In his diary, a British staff officer wrote, "We know not what lies within those walls. Yet from its shadow comes death." The uncertainty gnawed at morale. Every soldier felt that the monastery itself had become the enemy, silent, untouchable, and all-seeing. The 34th Division made small gains, reaching the outskirts of Cassino town below the monastery. But by late February, their strength was exhausted. Hundreds lay dead in the ravines, their bodies frozen in the rain-soaked mud. The German defenders, dug into caves and fortified cellars, seemed invincible. "They disappear into the mountain," reported one platoon commander. "You fire at shadows, and the shadows fire back." As the days passed, pressure mounted on Allied leadership. Photographs taken from the air showed no clear signs of German occupation, but the precision of enemy fire told another story. The 8th Army's intelligence section proposed a theory. Perhaps the Germans had built observation posts not inside the monastery itself, but beneath it, using ancient tunnels and catacombs carved into the rock centuries earlier. Such passages were known to exist, remnants of earlier reconstructions after previous destructions of the abbey. The idea of a hidden battle beneath the monastery spread quickly through the ranks. Engineers pored over pre-war architectural sketches, searching for signs of subterranean access routes. None were conclusive. Still, to the men fighting below, the thought of an unseen enemy moving under their feet made the mountain feel haunted, not by spirits, but by soldiers they could never find. One evening, as dusk settled over the shattered town, Captain Joseph Harmon of the 168th Infantry stood watching the abbey through field glasses. The setting sun glinted off something metallic near one of the side walls. Just for a moment, then vanished. He later recorded in his log, "A reflection from the abbey's south wall. Could be glass. Could be a scope. Can't tell. But they know we're here." The following day, Allied aircraft dropped leaflets urging the monks to evacuate. Few ever did. The abbot, Gregorio Diamar, refused to abandon his home. "We are neutral," he told visiting officers. "No soldiers are here." Yet only days later, Allied spotters once again reported muzzle flashes near the monastery's edge. By mid-February, frustration turned to resolve. The commanders agreed that the only way to level the field was to remove the monastery as an observation post entirely. The decision, once unthinkable, was made. Monte Cassino Abbey would be bombed. On the morning of February 15, 1944, over 1,400 tons of explosives fell upon the ancient site, reducing it to rubble visible for miles. Smoke rose in dark columns, blotting out the mountain's crown. For many soldiers watching below, the destruction felt both triumphant and tragic. "We have silenced the eyes that watched us," one man wrote. "But at what cost?" Unknown to them, within the shattered stones, the German paratroopers were still waiting, deep within their hidden defenses. The real battle for Monte Cassino was only beginning, and the mystery of what lay beneath the monastery would soon take an even darker turn. The bombing of Monte Cassino was meant to break the stalemate. Instead, it created a fortress of rubble. When the dust settled, the once majestic abbey was reduced to jagged stone and dust, but the German defenders, veterans of the 1st Volkssturmgewehr Division, moved swiftly into the ruins, turning them into the strongest defensive position on the Gustav Line. What the Allies had hoped to erase had, paradoxically, been reborn as an impregnable stronghold. In the days following the bombardment, U.S. units advanced cautiously, believing the monastery had been cleared. The 34th Infantry Division, reinforced by the 168th and 135th Regiments, began their ascent once more. But as they climbed through the devastated landscape, they encountered relentless machine gun fire from positions they couldn't locate. German troops, concealed in craters, cellars, and beneath collapsed arches, struck with precision. Every ridge seemed alive with unseen movement. "Every step we took," recalled Private Frank McKenna, "we felt like someone was watching from underground." His platoon reported strange sounds echoing through the rubble, metallic clinks, low murmurs, and sometimes the faint hum of engines. When engineers searched for the source, they found cracks leading into the mountainside, revealing natural caves that had been expanded into bunkers and firing positions. These networks allowed the Germans to move unseen, emerging, striking, and vanishing once more. The terrain itself was a weapon. The steep slopes, fractured by bombardment, made vehicle movement nearly impossible. Mules carried supplies where tanks could not go. Communication lines were fragile, often severed by shellfire or buried under landslides. American officers struggled to coordinate assaults across shattered terrain, relying on runners who risked their lives crossing open ground. "You shouted an order," wrote one sergeant, "and the mountain swallowed it whole." To the men, it felt like fighting the earth itself. The rubble provided perfect cover for snipers, while German mortars rained down from invisible positions. And yet, amid the chaos, some reports began to surface that made the situation even more disturbing. Several patrols swore they saw German soldiers vanish into the ground, disappearing through holes that appeared to lead beneath the ruins. By late February, American engineers conducted limited surveys of the slopes below the monastery. They discovered fragments of concrete and rebar not consistent with the abbey's medieval construction, modern reinforcements, poured in recent months. "There's something under there," concluded Lieutenant Edward Harrington of the 10th Engineer Battalion. "Something man-made, and not ancient." But further exploration was impossible under constant artillery fire. Rumors began to spread among the ranks. Some believed the Germans had uncovered old Roman catacombs and adapted them into defensive tunnels. Others suspected the existence of a secret observation post dug directly beneath the monastery, connected by narrow shafts to forward positions on the ridge. Whether true or not, the idea of an invisible enemy, moving under their feet, unsettled even the most battle-hardened troops. A captured German paratrooper only deepened the mystery. Interrogated by British intelligence, he spoke cryptically of the lower works, a phrase that appeared in several German field reports later recovered from Cassino. When pressed, the prisoner simply said, "You will never find them. The mountain hides us." His words, recorded in the war diary of the 4th Indian Division, left Allied analysts puzzled. As March began, the US units were pulled back, having suffered enormous losses. The town of Cassino below the monastery had been reduced to a maze of shattered buildings and craters. Thousands lay dead or missing. The psychological toll was immense. "We fought ghosts in that place," wrote one survivor. "They were there 1 second and gone the next." For the men who'd climbed the slopes of Monte Cassino, the mountain had become a tomb. Meanwhile, Allied intelligence analysts studied aerial reconnaissance photos of the abbey ruins. To their surprise, small changes appeared day by day. Shifts in rubble piles, new shadows along the southern wall, subtle signs of excavation. Either the Germans were digging, or something beneath was collapsing. A British staff officer noted, "The enemy seems to move not only above the earth, but through it." Modern historians now know that beneath the monastery's crest lay a network of caves and tunnels, some ancient, others expanded by the Germans into supply routes. But in early 1944, those passages were known only to a few on the German side, and to the Allied soldiers who could only guess at their existence. For the men on the front, the sense of mystery grew heavier each day. They spoke of distant vibrations in the ground during the night, as if heavy machinery was being moved deep inside the mountain. One American radio operator logged the incident. "Ground tremors felt during the 3rd watch. No artillery fire in the area. Possible tunneling." The entry was filed and forgotten as the battle shifted north, but decades later, it would resurface among declassified reports, lending weight to the theory that a hidden operation was indeed unfolding beneath Monte Cassino. By the time March turned to April, the Allies were preparing for their next offensive. But for the soldiers who had fought in the rubble, the memory of those unseen tunnels lingered. The mountain had swallowed not only men and machines but also answers. And as new forces gathered for the assault, whispers of the hidden battle beneath the monastery refused to fade. The truth of what lay under Monte Cassino was buried, literally, beneath the ruins, waiting for those brave or desperate enough to uncover it. When the bombing ceased and the guns fell silent for a brief spell in March 1944, the Allies assumed Monte Cassino had been shattered beyond usefulness. Yet within days, reconnaissance flights revealed movement among the ruins, tiny specks of men and flashes of light glinting off metal. The German Fallschirmjäger had not been destroyed, they had adapted. What was once a monastery had become a citadel of rubble, and beneath it, a hidden world was slowly coming into focus. The British 8th Army, now reinforcing the exhausted American forces, began piecing together fragments of intelligence that hinted at something extraordinary beneath the mountain. Reports from sappers of the 8th Indian Division described hollow ground beneath certain sectors, where the earth gave an odd echo when struck with a pickaxe. Patrols following up discovered fissures leading into natural caverns, some large enough to conceal entire platoons. "They live inside the mountain," one Gurkha officer reported grimly. "They appear, they kill, and they vanish again." At this stage of the war, the Allies were desperate to break through the Gustav Line. Field Marshal Harold Alexander, commanding the Allied armies in Italy, ordered renewed assaults against Cassino's ruins in late March. This time, the British 78th Division and elements of the New Zealand Corps took up the fight. Yet the problem was not only the strength of the defenders, it was their invisibility. Every Allied advance seemed anticipated, as if the Germans had an omniscient view of the battlefield. A diary found later among the papers of a German lieutenant revealed part of the answer. "We use the lower caverns to relay messages unseen. The English cannot hear us beneath their feet." These lower caverns were likely part of the ancient catacomb system beneath the Abbey Hill, originally used by monks and hermits in the Middle Ages. The Germans had expanded and reinforced them, linking the caves to machine gun nests and observation posts by way of narrow tunnels. From within, they could move men, weapons, and supplies without ever exposing themselves to Allied artillery. British engineers soon began to suspect the existence of these subterranean routes. During an assault on Castle Hill, a smaller peak just below the monastery, men of the 5th Royal West Kent Regiment uncovered a blocked tunnel entrance filled with gravel and debris. Inside, they found a German ammunition crate marked with an eagle insignia and a faint draft of air, suggesting the passage continued deep into the rock. Before they could explore further, heavy shelling forced their retreat. The entrance was buried once again, sealing whatever secrets it held. By April, intelligence officers from both the US 5th Army and the British 8th were convinced that some form of underground infrastructure existed beneath Monte Cassino. Yet confirming it was another matter. The area was too dangerous to excavate, and every attempt to map the ruins ended in casualties. "It's a fortress built by nature," remarked a British major, "and perfected by German engineering." The situation forced Allied commanders to rethink their approach. Rather than frontal assaults, they turned to infiltration and night raids. Small teams, often commandos or engineers, crept up the slopes to probe for weaknesses. One such mission, carried out by the British Special Service Brigade in early April, reported discovering vent shafts near the Abbey's western slope that emitted faint warmth and the smell of oil. The observation was dismissed at the time as meaningless. Only decades later, historians would theorize that these shafts ventilated underground chambers used as communication centers. Among the soldiers, rumors began to morph into myth. Men spoke of the hollow monastery, of paratroopers who fought from tunnels carved into solid rock. Some believed that the Germans had discovered long-buried catacombs and converted them into hidden hospitals. One Polish liaison officer later recalled hearing of an American reconnaissance patrol that vanished entirely while exploring a ravine south of the Abbey. Their disappearance was attributed to capture, but no bodies, no equipment, and no radio transmissions were ever recovered. The official record mentions no such incident, yet several testimonies from veterans of the 34th Division reference the missing patrol. Their fate remains one of the many unexplained fragments of the Cassino campaign, perhaps a product of confusion and chaos, or perhaps evidence of something deeper hidden beneath the mountain. Meanwhile, the battle raged on. As the spring rains turned the slopes to mud, the ruins above Monte Cassino continued to defy every assault. Each attempt to storm the monasteries remains met with withering crossfire. "We bombed it, shelled it, and climbed it," one British officer said, "but it stood, not in stone, but in will." By mid-April, it became clear that only a massive, coordinated offensive could finally break the German hold. As Allied engineers examined captured maps and intercepted communications, one cryptic reference appeared again and again in German documents: Schildstellung, or shield position. Analysts translated it simply as a defensive strongpoint, but others suspected it referred to the entire underground system beneath the Abbey. Its precise nature remained unknown. In the words of war correspondent Alan Wicker, who witnessed the siege firsthand, the monastery was gone, but the mountain lived. And under that mountain, something breathed still. By May 1944, the torch would pass to the Polish II Corps. They were to lead the final assault on the Abbey. But before they set foot on the slopes, Allied reconnaissance teams uncovered something unexpected: equipment marked with American serial numbers, items from units long withdrawn from the front. They appeared freshly disturbed, as if recently unearthed. The question arose: how had this gear ended up so close to the monastery's foundations? And what, if anything, did it reveal about the hidden tunnels beneath Monte Cassino? The answer, when it came, would only deepen the mystery. By May 1944, the monastery that had withstood months of assault was little more than a broken skeleton of stone, yet it continued to command the battlefield. Now the task of capturing Monte Cassino fell to the Polish II Corps under General Władysław Anders, a force made up of men who had survived Soviet gulags and Siberian camps, now determined to reclaim their honor on the slopes of that sacred mountain. The campaign would be their crucible, and for many, their grave. Before the assault, Allied reconnaissance teams combed the ruins below the Abbey in preparation. That's when the discoveries began. Near the base of the mountain, inside a collapsed cellar once used as a German field post, engineers from the 8th Army uncovered fragments of Allied radio equipment, American-made, with serial numbers tracing back to the 168th Infantry Regiment of the U.S. 34th Division. Those units had withdrawn nearly 2 months earlier. The discovery raised questions. How had their gear ended up deep inside a German position that hadn't fallen until weeks after the Americans left? One British intelligence officer, Captain Howard Fenton, recorded the find in his report dated May 9. Recovered radio parts and field packs from Cassino South Sector. Markings consistent with lost Red Bull unit. Condition suggests they were not destroyed but stored. Possible evidence of covert infiltration or capture of team. The implication was explosive. Had a small Allied unit attempted to infiltrate the Abbey before the main assaults? To understand the possibility, we have to look back at the chaos of February. During the height of the first battle, communication lines had broken repeatedly, and several reconnaissance patrols had gone missing. One of them, a 3-man radio team from the 168th, vanished during a night operation near Point 593, a critical ridge just below the monastery. Their disappearance was written off as capture or death in no man's land. But now, with their equipment resurfacing months later, the story no longer seemed so simple. The Polish engineers tasked with clearing the lower slopes soon made another startling discovery. Beneath the rubble of a destroyed farmhouse just east of the monastery, they uncovered a sealed entrance, timbered and reinforced with concrete. Inside was a narrow passage leading into the mountain. The air was stale, but fresher than expected. The soldiers pressed forward with lanterns and found themselves in a crude tunnel, barely wide enough for one man to walk upright. The walls bore scratch marks, some old, some fresh. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the tunnel ended in a collapsed chamber. Inside lay fragments of German field rations, empty ammunition crates, and, to everyone's surprise, a torn piece of American uniform webbing. Whether it belonged to the missing patrol or had been scavenged by German defenders was impossible to tell. The tunnel was quickly sealed again due to instability, but the rumor spread quickly through the Polish ranks. The Americans had been there before them, and perhaps beneath them still. General Anders, pragmatic as ever, refused to let the mystery distract his men. His focus was on the battle ahead. Yet even he acknowledged the oddities of the mountain. "Every side path seems to lead deeper," he wrote in his journal. "The Germans know this ground as if they built it themselves." His intelligence officers speculated that the Germans might have exploited the same subterranean routes once used by the monks to store wine and grain, turning centuries-old cellars into modern strongholds. The assault began on May 11, 1944, under the codename Operation Diadem. The night sky erupted with artillery fire from 1,600 guns. Polish troops advanced up the shattered slopes, illuminated by the flashes of their own bombardment. The air was thick with dust and the smell of cordite. Every inch of ground was contested, every rock concealed an enemy position. The battle raged for days, fought at point-blank range among the ruins and caves. It was during this chaos that one of the most haunting discoveries of the campaign occurred. A patrol from the Polish 3rd Carpathian Rifle Division stumbled upon a half-buried entrance near the northern slope of the Abbey. Inside, they found an underground storeroom filled with crates of ammunition and medical supplies. And, in the corner, a disassembled American SCR-300 radio. Alongside it lay a single dog tag, T.J. Reynolds, U.S. Army. The name matched a radio operator listed missing in action since February. There was no body. The find was kept quiet by order of command, logged only in a confidential field report later archived in London. But among the men who saw it, the implications were chilling. Had Reynolds and his team managed to infiltrate the tunnels months earlier? Had they discovered something within the mountain that neither side wanted revealed? By May 18th, the Poles finally stormed the ruins of the monastery. The German defenders, those who survived, were captured or withdrew northward. The Polish flag was raised over the shattered abbey, signaling the end of one of the bloodiest battles of the Italian campaign. Yet victory brought little clarity. Many of the tunnels the Germans had used were found collapsed or deliberately sealed with explosives. Others seemed to vanish into the bedrock itself. The mountain, as always, refused to give up its secrets. After the battle, Allied engineers began cataloging what they could. Dozens of interconnected caves, bunkers, and makeshift passages were mapped, but the full extent of the underground network was never determined. Several entrances mentioned in reports disappeared entirely after landslides or demolition efforts. As one Polish officer noted in his diary, the Germans left their mark not just on the land above, but deep below, where light has never reached. The discovery of the American equipment remained classified for decades. To this day, no definitive explanation exists. Whether it was evidence of a failed infiltration, scavenged trophies, or something far more covert, the mystery endures. As the dust settled over Monte Cassino, the Allies moved north toward Rome. But for the men who had fought there, American, British, and Polish alike, the mountain remained a place of unanswered questions. Somewhere beneath the monastery, in the labyrinth of tunnels and rock, history had buried a story no one had yet told. The fall of Monte Cassino in May 1944 marked one of the hardest-won victories of the war, but for the men who walked among its ruins, the triumph felt hollow. The abbey, once a symbol of peace and learning, was now a landscape of silence and death. Smoke still drifted from the shattered stones as the Polish II Corps and British engineers began clearing debris and searching for anything the Germans might have left behind. What they uncovered would raise questions that history has yet to answer. As the first systematic sweeps began, Polish sappers found portions of the abbey's lower walls reinforced with steel and concrete, construction that predated the Allied bombing. This discovery confirmed Allied suspicions. The Germans had fortified the site from below, long before the monastery was destroyed. But when engineers from the British 8th Army examined the ruins, they found something stranger still. Sealed shafts that descended beneath the monastery's foundation, leading to chambers that weren't on any official map. One of these chambers contained boxes of documents, many half-burned, written in both German and Italian. Among them was a file stamped, Operation Shield. Most of the contents were damaged, but several phrases stood out: Versorgung durch Untergrundnetz, supply through underground network, and Sonderstellung Cassino, special position Cassino. The meaning was unclear, but to intelligence officers, it implied that the German command had considered the tunnels not merely defensive positions but part of a classified strategic operation. Captain Robert Lang of the British Royal Engineers wrote in his field report, "We are dealing with more than simple fortifications. This was a planned system, communications, supply routes, perhaps even an escape corridor. It was not improvised." The discovery of additional sealed compartments added weight to his theory. Some of these spaces were filled with medical supplies and food, preserved in remarkable condition. Others contained radio components, their frequencies still tuned to German field channels. Most ominously, one chamber held several personal effects, German identification tags, handwritten notes, and a fragment of a coded message that read simply, "Section 4 will remain. Destroy all traces." The order seemed to have been followed to the letter. The deepest tunnels were either caved in or deliberately detonated, their entrances hidden beneath tons of rock. A small detachment of Polish engineers attempted to excavate one such section near the monastery's southern wall. They made it only a few meters before encountering a concrete barrier nearly a meter thick. On its surface, written in black German script, were the words, "Nicht öffnen, Gefahr." Do not open, danger. The tunnel was sealed again by Allied command. The official reason was safety. Unofficially, some suspected it was better not to know what lay beyond. In the months that followed, Allied intelligence teams combed through what remained of Operation Shield's documentation. Some of the surviving German officers, captured during the retreat north, were questioned about the tunnels. Most claimed ignorance. One paratroop lieutenant reportedly said, "The mountain was alive. We obeyed orders to hold it, not to understand it." Another, under interrogation, hinted that the network had been designed to conceal special materials from advancing forces. When pressed to explain, he fell silent. Back in London, military historians and intelligence analysts debated what the operation might have entailed. Some proposed that the Germans had used Monte Cassino as a relay point for encrypted radio communications, linking the southern Italian front with command centers in Rome and Austria. Others speculated about hidden caches, perhaps even secret archives or experimental equipment removed from the battlefield as the Allies advanced. Yet without access to the sealed tunnels, such theories remained unproven. A post-war British intelligence memorandum dated August 1945 summarized the matter with characteristic restraint. The structural evidence supports the hypothesis of a deliberate subterranean installation at Cassino. The scope and purpose remain undetermined. Excavation not recommended due to instability of the terrain and potential unexploded ordnance. For the soldiers who had fought there, these findings only deepened the sense of unease. The idea that beneath the ground where thousands had died, there might still be hidden rooms filled with unknown contents was unsettling. Some spoke of hearing strange echoes in the ruins when the wind was right, hollow sounds, as if air still moved through buried corridors. Decades later, in the 1960s and 70s, restoration work on the rebuilt monastery occasionally uncovered fragments of wartime debris, sections of twisted metal, old ammunition, and once, a rusted steel door that appeared to lead nowhere. It was reburied without investigation. The abbey's monks, who returned to rebuild after the war, said little about what they found. The mountain, one Benedictine abbot remarked in an interview years later, still keeps its memories to itself. The files of Operation Shield were eventually declassified in part during the 1990s, though much remained redacted. Historians could piece together only fragments, references to subsurface logistics, secured relay nodes, and controlled demolition upon withdrawal. No mention was made of the missing American radio team, or the discovery of their equipment during the Polish advance. By then, the surviving veterans of the 34th Infantry Division and the Polish II Corps had already passed into their later years. When asked about the tunnels, one elderly Polish engineer simply said, "We heard them digging." Even after the guns were quiet, the mountains still moved. His words captured what many who fought there had come to believe, that beneath Monte Cassino's monastery, the war had left something behind that no one had fully uncovered. And though the Allies had won the battle, the mystery of what truly lay beneath remained sealed. Concrete, silence, and unanswered questions buried deep in the rock. When the guns finally fell silent in Italy and the Allies pushed north toward Rome, Monte Cassino was left behind, a scar on the landscape, its monastery reduced to ash and rubble. The official reports declared victory and moved on, yet the soldiers who had fought there carried with them memories of something unfinished. Beneath that mountain, they felt, lay a story that had not ended when the shooting stopped. In the months following the battle, Allied engineers from the British Royal Engineers and the U.S. Army Corps began the dangerous work of clearing unexploded ordnance and stabilizing what was left of the abbey. Many of the tunnels identified during the battle were re-examined, but safety concerns limited exploration. Collapses were frequent, the ground unstable. By the end of 1944, nearly all accessible passages had been sealed with concrete, either for safety or secrecy. Their locations were classified under military archives marked restricted, accessible only to a handful of officers. As the war ended, the Vatican petitioned to rebuild the monastery. The reconstruction began in 1948, with the cooperation of both the Italian government and Allied occupation authorities. During the rebuilding process, workers occasionally uncovered remnants of wartime fortifications, steel girders, German ammunition boxes, even sections of wiring and ventilation ducts leading into solid rock. Each find was quietly removed, documented, and buried again. None of it appeared in the official reconstruction records. "We were told to focus on the light, not the past," said one Italian foreman years later. The past was too heavy. For decades, the story of the hidden battle faded into legend, mentioned only in veteran memoirs and obscure footnotes. Then, in the early 1990s, a team of Italian historians led by Dr. Lorenzo Bianchi sought permission to conduct archaeological surveys beneath the modern abbey. Using ground-penetrating radar, they detected several anomalies, voids and cavities roughly aligned with the pre-war structure of the monastery. Some of these anomalies were large, extending hundreds of feet into the mountain. Their existence was undeniable. Yet when requests were made to excavate, permission was denied by the Italian Ministry of Culture, citing structural risk and ecclesiastical sensitivities. It wasn't until 1998, during routine maintenance of a drainage tunnel near the Abbey's western slope, that workers uncovered what appeared to be part of a wartime bunker. Inside were rusted fragments of medical instruments, old radio components, and a corroded German field telephone. Curiously, there was also a small tin container bearing the faded initials TJR, the same initials that matched the missing American radio operator, Thomas J. Reynolds. The find reignited decades-old questions about whether Reynolds and his team had been captured, or if they had stumbled upon the tunnels before anyone else. The discovery made local headlines, but officials quickly downplayed its significance, labeling it inconclusive. Within weeks, the site was resealed. The items were removed to an archive in Rome, where they remain today, listed under Recovered Artifacts, Cassino Sector, 1944. Even now, historians debate what truly lay beneath Monte Cassino. Some believe the tunnels were little more than tactical shelters, expanded ad hoc during the battle. Others suspect something larger, a network of underground chambers used for communications, supply storage, or even intelligence operations linked to Germany's retreat north. The fragments of Operation Shield documents seem to support this view, though much of the material remains lost or redacted. To those who fought there, the speculation hardly mattered. For them, Monte Cassino was not just a battle, it was an ordeal. The American 34th Division, the British 8th Army, and the Polish II Corps all left pieces of themselves on that mountain. Over 55,000 Allied soldiers were killed or wounded in the campaign. Cassino, wrote war correspondent Eric Severide, was not just a fortress, it was a wound that never healed. In the decades since, the monastery has been lovingly rebuilt, its marble halls restored, its silence once again sacred. Tourists who visit today see beauty, not battle. They walk among sunlit cloisters, unaware that just beneath their feet lie the remains of wartime bunkers, filled-in shafts, and perhaps deeper tunnels still unexplored. For them, the war is history. For those who remember, it is something closer to memory, something the earth itself has not yet released. Before his death in 1987, a Polish veteran of the Cassino assault, Major Stanislaw Piasecki, gave a final interview to a BBC historian. When asked if he believed the tunnels still existed, he smiled faintly and said, "They do. You can hear them when the wind moves through the rocks. It sounds like breathing." Perhaps he was speaking metaphorically, or perhaps he had heard something that never made it into the reports. Either way, the mystery remains. The battle for Monte Cassino was fought above ground and below it, in sunlight and in shadow. And though the guns are silent now, the mountain still stands, a monument not just to courage and sacrifice, but to secrets buried deep in the stone. Some battles end in victory. Others, like the one beneath Monte Cassino's monastery, never truly end at all.